Hello my friends, welcome back to Visualize Value Design Fundamentals. We are going to be doing a crash course in typography and talking about all the different things that you need to know to master typography. A lot of subtle things. So first of all, let's talk about what you will commonly know as the font. So the font is the electronic file that represents a typeface that somebody somewhere sat down and designed letter by letter with a very specific communication objective in mind. And if you look through this list, this is the all of the fonts that are installed on my system right now. If you are not and have not been a designer or creative, this list is probably a little bit shorter than this, but nonetheless, the fundamentals remain the same. So just starting to talk about what typography says about you, your business, the things you're saying, how to find typefaces that work together, and how to build a typographic system that houses everything you throw at it. So I have a definite bias for the simpler, more geometric, cleaner typefaces. So things like circular, great typeface, free typeface, just looks super clean, fresh, and there's plenty you can do with it. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple different relationships that exist between typefaces. So of course you have your headlines, you have your small details that apply to a lot of different mediums. So in the case of any kind of editorial work or any detailed work, you have this need for these smaller typefaces, or these smaller text elements that tell more of the story. So I just want to play around with a couple things in real time here, and this is not going to be any heavy theory or anything like that, mainly because I don't know any. Most of this stuff I just learned on the fly, so I'm just going to share a couple of things that worked for me. So lorem ipsum, a good place to start messing around with placeholder copy. Actually, I'm not sure. Figma might have the ability to do that without getting off to another website, but I'm not sure. So no further ado. This is set in sentence case, so we want to make sure we are in neutral there. So a couple of different things to think about with typography. You obviously have your typeface, so in this case circular. You have your weight here, so bold, book, light, black. Depending on the typeface, there'll be an array of different weights within your typeface, so that will allow you to create different emphasis, just balance the page. So let's stick with bold 3M right here for this title here. And then you have obviously uppercase, lowercase. So in the case of these details that you want to be read as different elements, you can use things like the all caps to differentiate those elements. So you have your sentence case headline here. Let's run this onto a second line. And then you have your line spacing. So this will give you a default amount here, but when you start to get tricky with stuff, you can adjust that yourself. So set your headline, then we could have a byline here, and then we could start to play around with our body copy. So these different elements here allow you to give your type a relationship to the box that it is being contained within. So in this case, I want it to run off the top of the box. If it was a larger box, you could have it aligned to the middle or the bottom, depending on what you're trying to achieve, but we want a clean line at the top here, so we're going to use the top. You can then create try a little small, create these relationships between the type on the page, and these will all be available to you to mess around with. So come in here and play with these. There's also geometric elements we can bring in here. And again, the more contrast you can create with the type, the more interesting it looks. But there is I shouldn't say the more you can create. There's a balance here, of course, where you don't want to overcook any of this stuff. So another interesting tip here is when you're creating relationships between elements, you want to keep that distance uniform. So in the case of these smaller headlines, what I'm doing is making sure there's 50 pixels between each of the margin above this is 50 pixels. So you can hold your shift key down and hit up or down, and it'll move an element 10 pixels at a time. So just creating that uniform relationship to the elements themselves, and then we can bring in these. I think we can go down a little bit here. Oops. So one example there. Can then take these elements that we have and start to play around with those. So if we wanted to display some statistics, let's say it's too small, some contrast within these elements always creates a little bit of visual interest as well. So if you're able to get some of that nuance in, it just creates these little interesting details that are going to help attract eyeballs. But the important thing is to retain those relationships as best you can. So let's bring this guy up. We haven't started to play with color yet, but of course color creates a huge amount of focus in whatever it is you're working on. I'm turning my night mode off here. So now you start to see, whoops, you start to see where the eye gets focused, and that's our job, right, to lead the eye. So typography is an incredible device for leading people's eyes. So what we want somebody to read first, in this instance, is this guy. In this instance, it's headline, byline, body copy. So making very deliberate decisions about what we highlight and then playing with some different devices here. Again, when you start to get a little bit more into this stuff, you can play around with little subtle things like your letter spacing. Get this kerned in nice and tight here. Whoops. Oh, it's a percentage now, so let's do 4. So you're starting to see how we're creating relationships between these things. We're creating hierarchy in here, and we are building somewhat of an editorial system. So, oops, let's take this down again and play with color. Even adjust some of these weights here. Okay, one other example we can play around with is, let's switch this up totally. So let's go for something a bit more, oh, missing the font. So we have this geometric, almost clinical feeling design palette here typographically, and that's there's a number of reasons for that. One being you have these geometric fonts are super clean and they feel like the more technical brands that you're familiar with, the Apples of the world. We also have this mono spaced font here, which gives that, like, it feels technical, feels almost like command line, so that's got its own connotations. So this whole thing has a mood, has a vibe, right? We're using a combination of typefaces that create this feeling. So let's try something different here and go for something a bit more sophisticated. So I'm gonna start by making this stuff visible for you. Let's get this into a and then I'm going to use a font called Adobe Garamond. Do I have it? Strange. Pro. Okay. And I'm going to run out the tracking on this. So there's a, sorry, the letter spacing. I get that wrong. Letter spacing. Run that out a little bit. It kind of looks like it's been put together on a letterpress, so feels a bit more historic. It's got a bit more history in there. And then I think we'll use that same font for our body copy here. Another great way to add a little visual interest to your body copy or any element of the type that has a decent amount of words to get through is to add a little bit of emphasis on certain points. So then let's copy this down here, and we're gonna do some rebranding here. Very, very nice. So we're actually only using, let's only use Garamond for a minute. Actually, no, that's grim. Where can we go with this? I think times has actually got nicer numerals. Yeah, nice. And we're going to just put some individual going to pick the color of the background and just give it a little, almost like it's embossed into the image there. This is feeling heavy now. Drop that back down. So we have a totally different aesthetic at this point, and then let's throw in a little mark up here. So grab yourself a little circle. So that looks good. And then we are going to find a I think I have a font in here that has a bit of a, maybe not. Let's just go with some numeric stuff here. Sorry, some so I'm looking for a monogram. Monogram is what I meant. Okay. Drop the size of this down. Turn this into a mark of some kind. So you notice that we're fully in Figma at this point, and we can create a whole design system without leaving the confines of this browser window. Create content all day long. So we now have this very different looking system, but you'll see how the typographic the hierarchy has been inherited from here. So we can create a look from essentially changing typefaces. So I'm just going to do another little detail on here, fill up that space a little bit. Maybe even add another detail. What date are we on here? May 5th. Oh, if only. And then again, the same, well, we haven't covered that yet, but we're going to talk about some alignment stuff. So this, there's something that we're going to talk about in a little while around alignment and relationships to other elements on the page. So this actually fits a little nicer up there. Okay, great. Again, this is should be a therapeutic exercise to work through a lot of this stuff and just find the stuff that feels right and fits the work you're doing. This is obviously evoking a very different vibe than this. So again, let's do one more for posterity. Let's mix it up a little bit more. So maybe we'll do a cover of some sort. So let's take this guy. So Thaz Adith. I don't know much about this font here, but let's play with it for a second. So actually no, don't like it. Dozzle. Okay, let's do this. So this is a free font, so you can get this, grab this from Google. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in a couple of lessons time. So let's roll with this. What are we going to do here? Let's make a table of contents, shall we? Oops. Change this guy away from this color space. Maybe we go a little. Let's go white. Whoa. Seems like my keyboard just stopped working. Okay. So let's imagine that this is a graphic for let's get that in the middle, a graphic for a firm looking to articulate how they think about something. So let's pull back some circular. Maybe a little more. Whoops, not that much. Not much. These lines are fairly useful in organizing division between content. So I'll throw another one in here. Eyeball that. And let's grab some copy here. We're going to do a little bonus round in here where we have a subhead and body copy. So if we grab all of this, again, we're playing with hierarchy here. So obviously we have this mark, that's drawing your eye in to begin with, pull you over to this headline, get you down to this overview, and then we're breaking up the copy with some additional contrast and the difference in type size down here. So let's just drop the size here a little bit. There are ways to set up these paragraphs, but it's actually a little easier, I find, to just create separate elements. Does look a little bit different. Okay. Okay, this is giving me problems because that's not down there. Perfect. And then just another couple things, like a couple things to mention here. You want to, as best you can, avoid these really short run-ons here. Call one word hanging over there. You can call a widow, but we can also play around with the alignment here to fix those things. So this is looking pretty good now. Pull this down here. And then center it a little more. I'm going to add a little branded detail here too. So let's talk that up a bit. Be a bit much. Okay, so just to recap some of this stuff, here's where we started. Up here with our typography basics, black and white with our 3 different elements here, and started to introduce some color, started to introduce different levels of importance to our different elements on the page. Then playing with different ways to arrange type. So rather than having your run-on body copy, you have these pull-out data points. You have columns of information. We have bullet points here, and then reversing color schemes, but keeping within this same system. So if you were to build a system where you had a brand color, you can use that as a device to highlight information, or you can go full on with it and make the entire canvas that color. And then further down here, we went a little bit further out and started to experiment with different feelings of typefaces and how a different set of typefaces is going to create a very different vibe. So we're just scratching the surface on some of this stuff. You'll have access to all of these canvases, and I'm going to likely come back in here and record another lesson on this. So this is Module 1, Typography. Thank you for watching.